without further ado, and hello to everyone. This is the new rules of SEO. And I actually have been waiting to do this presentation for like a year at this point. It's been percolating in the back of my mind with Eduardo Morales, who is our head of growth as well. And about a year ago, we started kind of formulating this because we started realizing that many of the sort of the kind of rules of thumb, the kind of best practices of the industry were starting to change. And they were starting to change really because one, Google was getting more and more sophisticated. So we're going to talk about it a little bit, but this idea of like, how do you game Google was sort of shifting as Google became more sophisticated. Two, things were changing a lot as you go. And what I mean by that is, you know, as an SEO person, you're kind of always at the mercy of what's Google doing or what's Bing doing, how is this changing, how did the algorithm change? And things were changing and changing quickly, where it sort of made sense that you needed a strategy that would work no matter what change happened. You just had to kind of go directionally where things were going, number two. And then number three, I wanted to do this presentation for a long time because there were certain fields that started to become adjacent or related to one another, and people didn't realize how fields were changing. For instance, SEO on one hand and PR on the other hand started to be actually two sides of a similar coin. But yet SEO people didn't really know they were doing PR, and PR people didn't realize that one of the most valuable things they were doing actually impacted SEO. And so you started seeing these kind of relationships form. And so this presentation is about a year in the making. And what we want to start off with is start off by looking kind of at the old way of thinking and how this new way of thinking is starting to shift in practical and surprising ways that impact the work that all of us do. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. You can keep questions coming in the chat there that Jackson will help me out with. And I'm going to kind of load the presentation here. And it is called The New Rules of SEO. And I'll give you maybe the 60-second version of just who I am and sort of my journey in SEO. And then the focus will be entirely on you and what you can do today and tomorrow and next week and next month to get greater SEO results, and why I think this is a tremendous opportunity actually during the pandemic to really dramatically speed up and accelerate your SEO rankings. So first of all, just in terms of what Jackson said and who I am and who we are, I am the founder of TOP Global. TOP is an acronym. It stands for Test, Optimize, and Perform. And it's actually now 11 different agencies that all work together, have a common data-driven approach. We got our start because we were known for an agency called PR Hacker, which is a viral marketing and PR agency. One of the things that PR Hacker we're super good at doing is building a lot of links. And I'll talk about how that impacts SEO, and building links at scale in the not, a few or not, a couple dozen, but like hundreds at a time, and why that's important. But then also a number of other agencies are really important for those wanting to do SEO, such as Top Data. We're a data market research and data packaging agency. I'm going to talk about the significance of data a bit later. Some of the vertical agencies, whether it's Top Finance or Top Tech or Top Health, or some of the specialty agencies like Top Digital, which is really a digital first agency that does primarily SEO and SEM driven work, but also has other elements of digital video and other elements of sort of digital activations. So that's kind of who we are. And just to sort of shape my view of this, just a few things of what we do. So we got our start with scrappy startups, fast growing companies, had no brand equity. And then a lot of big brands came calling, and we started doing a lot of PR campaigns for those big brands, but quickly some of those big brands had big SEO goals as well. And it sort of changed into that. And that's kind of like that juxtaposition of PR and SEO, and why I think the two are highly related, even though it kind of attracts different sorts of people. They're sort of like right brain and left brain, but I think they're actually closer disciplines than people realize. And then finally, kind of just who I am, I got my start with this book, How to Go to College Almost for Free. We sold 2.5 million copies of the book, and largely by doing digital first promotions, whether that was on social media, on SEO, getting inbound links, getting media coverage at scale, thousands. I did 5,000 media interviews in 3 years for that book. And so a lot of this is informed not only by our agency work, but like me as a 21-year-old author. I apologize for being on the cover of that book. I hope that doesn't deter anyone from actually reading it. But getting my start being a self-published book, eventually it became, you know, one of the few self-published books that became a global bestseller. And so a lot of my view of how SEO can work was influenced by that and all of the link building we did for that book. So the final thing I'll say before we start with the new rules and the compared to the old way, one thing we're going to draw upon, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples today, is from National Today. National Today is a platform that is a division of our agency. If you haven't checked it out, you can go to nationaltoday.com. And we built that site really from nothing, from 0 users, by using a lot of the principles we're going to talk in today into the most popular holiday website in the world for these like buzzworthy holidays. I'm going to talk about how we structured that and how we grew so quickly. But in particular, what we do is if you go to check out National Today, and you can see this in action, we do things like, you know, celebrate National Margarita Day, or National Tequila Day, or National, you know, Respect Your Cat Day, or, you know, just last month we created International Dark and Stormy Day for Gosling's Rum. And before that, we shifted the date for Thomas Bagels of National Bagel Day because it conflicted with National Pizza Day. Plus, we popularized Mean Girls Day, if you've ever seen the movie by Lindsay Lohan, Mean Girls. So it's this niche site that deals in viral daily activation, and I'm going to show you some of the SEO work that went behind it and how we got so popular so fast. Okay, so let's start off with the first essential question that we're going to ask and answer. And again, post additional questions to Jackson. Jackson, feel free to jump in if you have additional questions that you want to break into. But I'm going to sort of pose this first question, which is, what SEO questions are we asking now that we didn't ask before? And if you like any of the questions, feel free to take a picture. You can tweet at me at Benjamin Kaplan. We can have a discussion on Twitter as well. So here was the old way, this old question, which was, how do I write an article that one-ups the competition? Essentially, we know that SEO is related to content. We need really good content that Google thinks is better. And so this was actually the old way. And some of you may be thinking, well, the old way, this is what I did today. This is what I did yesterday, right? So there's some fashion of this that still exists. How do I write an article that one-ups the competition? But the new way is, how do I become a thought leader in a particular topic? So what we're trying to do is that sort of like one-off article approach. It's slow, it's time consuming. You can definitely do it, but really at Top Global, at PR Hacker, at Top Data, at Top Digital, we like things that can scale. And so finding these ownable areas that we can own that relate to content and the content we want to win can just allow us, if we become a thought leader, to scale the link building, to scale you know, the view of our content in the eyes of Google, can scale content clusters and topics related to things much easier. It makes your editorial calendar easier to figure out what you're writing about. So I think, you know, this deals with a very common theme you're going to hear today, which is a lot of kind of the earlier period in SEO was like gamesmanship, right? Like, how do we get an unfair advantage? How do we win? And then as Google got more sophisticated, it starts to be like, how do we actually become an expert? How do we actually become a thought leader? I'm going to give you more examples of that later. But for now, old way, one up the competition with an article. New way, actually become a thought leader in an ownable area and have content flow from that. Here's another example. Old way. We would say, how can I get this blogger to link to me, right? I'm trying to get, I know links is probably, you know, essentially the essential insight that allowed Google to become Google, right? In the early days, Google like realized that, hey, you could tell a quality of a website by the quality of the people linking to it. And essentially it was the insight was, it's like, it turns out like the World Wide Web or the internet is like a high school popularity contest, right? And it's how popular are the people who like you, they link to you, then you're popular. So that was the old way. The new way is, how can I get the top 50 media outlets to link to me? What I mean by that is, we're still individually building links, but if you do this right, and if you do this with a more scalable approach to link building, which we'll talk about, you can actually get the New York Times to link to you. You can get USA Today to link to you. You can get CNBC to link to you. So it doesn't have to be this one-off approach of that's very slow. Instead, you can start gathering 100 links at a time, which is transformative if you're trying to build SEO and accelerate the process. Old way. ask yourself, which keywords have the most search volume? Okay, I'm looking at all these keywords. These are things I can win. You know, I want something that has 1,000 monthly searches over 100 monthly searches, or 5,000 over 1,000, or 10,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000. That's better. More is better. The new way is, what keywords best match the search intent of my user base? So where this is kind of evolved to is that because Google is tracking, like, are people, you know, they're tracking the bounce rate. You know, people visiting your site, it's clearly not their search intent, right? They were looking for a definition of a term and you tried to sell them stuff, right? So they're leaving fast. Or maybe another example, you know, people, you know, you just had, you know, people like kind of looked at your content, it was kind of thin, you know, they could glance at it in 10 seconds, understand, and they left. Versus they want to delve deeper. They want to fill out the form. They're going to other pages. Google got more sophisticated. It can tell all these things. So at the core, it was not just raw search volume. It was actually, can we match search intent? This is very parallel. If you saw my presentation last week, which is the new rules of social media, which we did, we started talking about, hey, with social media, it's not just raw audience. It's like the engagement of that audience, right? Like, so it's not just raw quantity, quality matters. Same thing happened for SEO, right? It's not just raw volume of the searches we're doing. It's actually, can we actually really understand the search intent, understand how it shifts based on the term, and deliver something that really matches? Because if we do that, ultimately Google's going to see our value. And Jackson, I'll just pause there before I go to the old way or the new way. And Jackson, one, any other questions for the group? And two, your thoughts on this, because I know, Jackson, you're on the front lines of doing PR campaigns, and we're big link builders, and sort of that relationship between PR and SEO that a lot of times people don't realize that PR is one of the most powerful weapons in the SEO toolbox.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I think one of the things that I spoke to while we were kind of getting set up in the webinar and getting ready to start was the importance of providing high value insights and using that to encourage backlinks from editors when doing PR outreach. Basically, pursuing PR in such a way that you're setting yourself up for success when it comes to backlinks.
Well, and here's the beautiful part. When you think about like high level insights, what we often talk about, we're going to get into a little bit later, is data, right? We like data. Why do we like data? Why is, besides data being cool, interesting, right? It's like, we're a data-driven agency and network of agencies. But the reason we like data for link building is two qualities about data. One, usually if you're going to use data, you have to cite where it's from. And a citation is a close cousin of a link, right? Basically, an online citation often is a link. So one, we like that because data needs citations, citations lead to links. Second thing that's really interesting, I think, is that data is really great for links, because usually what happens is there's a lot of stuff in the report. There's a lot, you know, the media can't list all of it. So they're going to give you a sample of it. They're going to give you a summary of it. They're going to give you some insights from it. Like, you want more? We got a link to it. Here it is. Go get it. So those are two aspects of why data as a high value insight is powerful, because it actually leads to links naturally, not by trying to fake something. You know, kind of like the old playbook, Jackson, as you know, the old playbook when you're trying to build links was like link to me and I'll give you a social mention, right? Because you didn't want to reciprocate the link because that wasn't as valuable to you, right? So you want to like, give me the link and I'll give you something else. And now it's a little bit more natural and like using insights and data to just make you naturally link to me.
I think this might speak to one of the questions we have here is from Alosha, and I'm sorry if my pronunciation's off on your name, but tremendous question, which is, what SEO strategies would you recommend to a super early stage startup that doesn't have a big budget yet, aside from, you know, the technical stuff, right? Like what other kinds of tips and tactics might you give?
Okay.
And
well, and actually, oh, sorry, go ahead. Was there a second part of the question?
I was going to say there are a couple of other questions here if you kind of want to, you know, set the table for where the presentation's going.
Okay,
you know,
sure.
let me know, but maybe speaking to Alicia's point first.
Okay, let's do Alicia first, and then let's jump in with the other questions as we go, whenever you think the time is right, Jackson. So I think in terms of early stage startup, a few things you can do. Number one, set yourself up with the right systems and processes in how you approach content from the beginning, because it's a lot less work to sort of get your content strategy right from the beginning than try to redo it again. So what I mean by that is, for instance, we talked about data recently. If you can bake data into what you do, so if let's say you have an app, and yeah, you could like, you know, take 5 developers with a month to like pull out insights from the app and people how are using it. Or you can take 10% more time and build it so it's easy to get data out. That sets you up for a lot of not only PR stories for branding and things like that later, but that starts to set you up for the kind of insights that leads to link building later. So you don't have to necessarily early stage build all those links right away. You might be just like trying to we're just trying to ship a product out the door, right? Minimum viable product. I don't have time to do all this. But if you take a little bit of extra time to sort of set that up and be like, yeah, I'm going to want to have data insights from my app that I've built or that I've collected, or if it's not an app, right? I want a means to get feedback from customers and have surveys and use that and set that up from the beginning. Those are the things that lend themselves to that. And then the other thing I'd say that is very important early stage, and we're going to talk about this later, is the idea of winning small niches. So if you're just starting out with SEO, you don't have to go after the most competitive keywords. Instead, look at little niches that are not competitive. And I'm going to show you a little bit later about how winning those little niches, it's actually shifted, helps you win the bigger ones later. So what I would say is that don't go necessarily, we got to tackle, you know, the biggest, you know, we got to go up against Microsoft and win head to head with Microsoft. Instead, look for what are called long tail keywords, little niches that you can win. And if you structure them in the right way, it helps you win bigger stuff later. So that's the short answer, but I'm going to give you some more strategies shortly. Let's jump in to kind of the next, we'll jump back into the slides here, and we'll do another old way, new way before we get to the 6 rules we're going to go over today. So the old way, you'd ask a question like, how do I write a good SEO article, right? Okay, what are the keywords I have to do? What are synonyms of those keywords? How do I structure my H1 headlines, my H2 headlines, and so forth? What other people have written on this topic? Typically, a common approach is the skyscraper approach, which means we're going to build a bigger skyscraper, right? So if they, built a 20-foot skyscraper, 20-foot building with their content, you're going to build 25 feet. And someone else builds 30, you're going to build 50 feet, right? So that was the old way. Still, we want to be competitive. We want to think about competitors, but here's the new way, in my opinion. How do you create a scalable SEO blueprint? So instead of necessarily going just article by article, we're going to talk about the role and the rise of local SEO and what that plays in the process now. But instead, often on our team, we're not trying to create one article at a time. We're trying to create 50 at a time from a common blueprint or template. So we're trying to find a framework that we can derive other articles from it. We can vary different pieces of it so that it's new, it's original, it's unique. But we might be scaling this out across a lot of different niches within a certain subject area, right? Or we might be trying to do alternate versions for local. So instead of sort of this one-off approach, I'm just going to be the build the bigger building. Instead, it's city planning, right? Like, let's make a building as a blueprint for one building that we can turn into 30 buildings that we're going to dominate across a range of search topics. So that's the new way, SEO blueprints rather than SEO articles. The old way. What aspects of the Google algorithm can we leverage to get an unfair advantage, right? It was all about gaming the system. At the very early days of SEO, it was about tricking Google, right? We just stuff keywords in the page, even though the page has nothing to do with the keywords. Google caught on that one pretty fast. And then we started saying, okay, let's look like a page that matches what the user is looking for, even though it doesn't actually have to match, right? In some ways, people took shortcuts. They were penalized later because they were saying it doesn't actually match what the user is searching for. Instead, it sort of gives the semblance of what the user is searching for. And what the new way is, instead of looking for holes in Google that we can exploit, it's much more about how can we leverage Google to understand and serve the needs of the user. So what we're actually doing here is actually looking at how do we use Google's very sophisticated, for instance, machine learning, very evolved click data, where they can tell if people are clicking on things and then clicking away from things or clicking more deeper into things. And actually using Google, not so much to find holes or game Google, but instead to like use Google to really understand what the user wants, really understand what the intent of the user is, and try to deliver something that just matches that. So it's really a sea change in approach, and it's actually working with Google, not working in opposition to Google to find that one thing that gives us the unfair advantage that puts us at the top and puts our competitors low. And Jackson, yeah, is there a question?
Yeah, there's actually a really relevant question here from Nancy, who wants to know how exactly do you go about discovering the intent of users? If you're getting traffic, for example, and it just doesn't seem obvious what it is that your site visitors want, how do you determine that, and how do you create something that's highly relevant to their needs?
Okay, so one of the things you can look at, I'll talk about one kind of short way and then one longer way we're going to get into later. One of the first things you look at is you look at the results served by Google. Not just your own results, but what are the places that are ranking high? And do those match your intent, or are they something different? So a very common issue that comes up is, let's say you're trying to promote your product or your service or your brand or your company. And everything at the top is like understanding the top. It's not promoting something. It's like understanding, right? So it's like, oh, what does this jargon mean? How do you approach this subject? So right there, you'd say, oh, the intent looks like it's different because Google is ranking high. And what you do is you assume that what's ranking high, Google is smart enough to know what is matching the intent, all things being equal. So if Google's serving something high, that starts to be a clue of what people are looking for. Now, if it's a mixed bag, it's all over the place, right? All the results aren't of one type. Then you're like, okay, maybe Google hasn't figured this one out yet. Maybe it's still unclear. So maybe we have a way to shape what that's looking for. Let's think about the term deeply. So that's number one, is you look at the results, you look at clues for what's performing well to start to understand. But second, I'm going to talk about a little bit later as we get into the rules, lead intent mapping. And specifically what you can do is basically use something like Google Analytics and track, and we do this for our clients, track where people are going on the site. And we will actually write down questions that they're asking in their mind as they go. So I'll get into this a little bit more later, but let's say you see someone, they end on the landing page, okay, and you look at the search term, that was their intent. But then you see them go to like a local page. Okay, so now they're asking, you write down the question. You say like, oh, now they're asking, is this company in my town? And then suddenly they jump over to a service page of yours. And then now they're asking like, oh, does this company do what I need them to do? And then suddenly they jump over to something else like the blog or the careers page. And you're like, well, were they just looking for a career? Like maybe, or maybe they're looking like, how credible is this company, right? How viable is this company? Does it look like, during the pandemic, they're still hiring folks, or does it look like they've shut down? I'm trying to find out a little bit more. So the second answer to your question is actually writing down, as you see them go through pages, what are they asking? Why are they clicking there? That starts to lead to understanding intent. Let me move on, and then we're gonna revisit that in the 6 rules I'm gonna give you at the end. So the old way. How many sites can I reach out to for link trades and guest blog posts, right? So this used to be like, okay, let's just go out in a one-by-one fashion. Rule of thumb was like, okay, if you were like generating like 10 links a month by this way, you're doing pretty good. Here's the new way. How can I create something of value to get everyone to want to link to me? So yes, some of this is like, we want to push ourselves to people like, hey, link to me. Hey, look at this. Hey, you should post about this. Hey, might we trade something? You can still do those things. But the way to move the needle more is to actually create something valuable. So this link building really parallels the development of Google itself, right? As Google got more sophisticated, it was about matching the search intent of the user, not just serving content that sort of matches a keyword. And then the same thing has happened to link building. It's not just like, okay, I need to be an outbound sales organization of links and go to as many people as I can to sell a link. There's an element of that, but the way to move the needle faster, to scale links more, and if links is the number one thing you can do to accelerate your ascent up the Google SEO rankings, then instead it's like, how do I become really valuable so that people naturally want to link to me? And I'm going to show you how we do that in National today. Old way, last couple here. Old question is, what SEO work can I do now for results months later, right? SEO typically, traditionally, is not an instant gratification medium, right? It's like, it takes a while to write some content. It takes a while to sort of study keywords. It takes a while to look at what competitors are doing, try to figure out, how the Google algorithm is functioning. So it tends to be a little bit like mid to long-term discipline. But here's what I would suggest the new way is. What SEO work can I do now for results next week? There's a bunch of changes in how Google Search Console reports information, how by breaking things down into smaller chunks, you can actually understand and see results right away. Not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean that you go from 100 to number one, in a week, but you can start to see indicators of progress you're making faster. And so we're going to talk about why I think the time horizon for doing SEO work has sped up. And then the old way was, how do I win universal search terms, right? It's like if you were like a real estate agent, how do I win the term for real estate agent? But the new way is actually, how do I win niche plus local search terms? We're going to talk about this too when we talk about new rules, but one of the big changes is how Google displays local results. And not just on things that are obviously local. Like if you search for a restaurant, Google might say, oh, you're looking for a local restaurant to eat at, so we're going to give you sort of that result. But even for things that don't seem that local, suddenly it's changing. So suddenly this idea of just going after the big universal terms, that maybe the niche and local might be displayed more than you think. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So to kind of get this sort of point across, everything we've looked so far is kind of the old way and the new way. You've noticed they've all been phrased as questions. And I would say that overall, SEO success is less about having the easy answers or always knowing what will work out of the gate. And instead, it's more about asking the right questions. And if you ask the right questions, you can dramatically increase your ascent up the SEO rankings. So Jackson, that's the first part. Before I get into kind of the 6 kind of new rules that I want everyone to remember, any other questions? I know you said you had a couple others.
Yeah, I think this one, as we get into the rules, is going to be really relevant for a few of our attendees who had sort of similar questions. And I'll read one question just so we kind of see an example of this.
Sure.
Dea is the founder of Lifograph, which you check out at lifograph.com. I did. It's a cool site.
Okay.
But their idea is they want to be like the wiki of people. So individuals are able to create pages and profiles and shows connections between people.
Okay, so I want to say like I'm gonna go into like the Jackson Carpenter page, and this is like, okay, this is a cool guy. I need to know. I want to be connected. Okay, sure.
Totally, and it's connected to top, and you can kind of see how everyone's. She posed an interesting question, right? She wants to know what kind of SEO strategy she needs to be pursuing to make sure that these profiles are showing up right alongside LinkedIn profiles and Twitter accounts. So I think these rules are going to speak to sort of how to do that, at least in broad strokes. And I think there are a number of attendees who are asking similar questions, right? Which ultimately is, how do I get up rankings, right? How do we do SEO practically speaking? So
it's a great question. It sounds like a cool platform. And a couple things I want to mention and just how to approach it. So one of the things when you mention like, I want to be up there with LinkedIn, or I want to be up there with Wikipedia, or those kind of places, those are all sites that have a high domain authority, meaning in like on this 100-point scale, if 100 is the top, these are all, sites that rank near the top, right? Like in the 90s, let's say. And so when we are starting out and we're new, we have, it's an algorithmic scale. So, or an exponential scale. So what happens is we have a lower domain authority. So what we got to do is this kind of like give and take for increasing our domain authority quickly. What is the number one lever we can do with that? It's actually link building, right? So as we become more popular by places that are popular. So things like I mentioned before about using PR and data study early on to increase our domain authority out of the gate. But then we've got to also start increasing the number of pages, and in particular, start with pages that are easier to win, right? So things that are more niche oriented, focused, maybe not famous people, unfamous people, right? Other forms of pages. So we've got to dramatically increase our number of pages. But as we do that, we can't increase it too much because it then dilutes the average performance of every page. We just added all these pages. No one's really seeing them yet. And so that can actually put a damper on our domain authority as well. So it's kind of this give and take when you're new. One of the best things you can do is develop a program to get scalable links. And I'm going to talk about that in depth. Do that early to get your domain authority score higher. But then start expanding the pages you do, but don't expand them too fast until you can drive enough links to justify the expansion. Because otherwise, what you'll do is that your average page authority across all these pages you're created will be low unless you get the domain authority high. So you kind of got to do these two things simultaneously. Combination of domain authority, content, domain authority, content, and then you scale those up together. And because Google rewards sort of a specific topical focus, I'm going to show you an example of this for National Today. On National Today, which is our holiday website, we outrank on a lot of terms some of the most popular sites in the world. And the question is, well, how? I mean, we have quite a good domain score, domain authority in the 70s, but we're competing with some places with 90s. But because we have topical expertise, as Google has identified, we can still win. So the combination of that is, let's get the links up, let's raise the domain score, let's have content sort of match that. As that goes up, we can add more content, but then let's also, at the same time, develop a topical expertise, an area that we own. We're going to talk about the importance of that later, and let's use it to win battles there. We can even beat out people that are higher than us in raw domain authority because we're more specific in our expertise than they are. And hopefully that makes sense. So let me jump back in. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start going through these new rules, and I think it's going to be super helpful for anyone who has a question just like that. Let me kind of go in here, and we'll talk about what new rules govern SEO as we know it. Rule number 1, new rule, develop an ownable area. So we were just talking about this. That's why it's a great segue to say an ownable area, an area of expertise, is useful for a few different reasons. One, it's a way to get links being built to you much faster than if you go article by article. Because what happens when you develop an ownable area is that people seek you out for that expertise. People seek you out for that thought leadership. And so sometimes you get links when you don't even try to get links. They just happen. And I'll give you an example of that in a second from our work. So that's useful. But secondly, if you develop an ownable area of that expertise and Google perceives that sort of subject expertise, it allows you to win battles with larger sites with higher domain authority that are more general, that are not as focused. So if you can focus those ownable areas in the things that you can win, in those niches that you can win initially, and then gradually broaden as you go compete with others, that's a really powerful strategy. So let me give you an example of National Today. This is like, the National Today site. It's a holiday platform to leverage the power of viral holidays. So here's World Coconut Day on September 2nd. And that became an ownable area for us. So we were looking at how do we make a site that is all about a viral platform, that's all about triggering users to take action. We wanted a time trigger. We wanted to make this kind of viral marketing platform. And we noticed that there was actually opportunity related to owning these kind of like buzzworthy and viral holidays. There were sites that existed, but they sort of weren't optimized to leverage that in the way that we could. So that became an ownable area. And now what actually happened is we had that ownable area, and just a couple of years later, we're the leading website in the world for these viral holidays. We rank for more than 5,000 different holidays on Google. Millions use it as the source of truth for what happens on each day. And then we can do some interesting things because we have that ownable area. So as a result, we can do scalable link building. So we, for each of these holidays, are creating either it's a survey, a data study, a place where, a listing of where you can get free stuff on National Bagel Day, insights for International Women's Day. And we're actually pitching that out to media outlets. Now, in our start, for us to get a link, we'd have to pitch it out. Now, on the typical day, we might get dozens of links that we didn't even seek out. In a typical month, in terms of new links, it might be anywhere from 7,500 links in a month to 30,000 links in some of these spiky kind of months. And a large percentage of those we didn't even generate by pitching someone, people just link to it. So we created an ownable area, an area of expertise. And because we're the best game in town for these viral holidays, and oh, it's going to be National Donut Day, you want to know, what is America's favorite donut, and which donut does people in Texas versus New York and California like? We're the place to come for that. As we get known for that in an ownable area, suddenly, for instance, the popular food website Delish links to us all the time. We're not asking them to link to us. They're just doing it because it serves them well for their story. It's a hook they can use. And that's why finding an ownable area is really important. So I want to mention this because I think data studies are so powerful for link building. Insight number one, choose a data study that will yield insights that reinforce your brand or that kind of ownable position. And two, localize results for specific cities and states to generate local shares, links, and headlines. So because media is organized geographically, if I can give a result for National Donut Day that says, what does Phoenix love? What kind of Phoenix loves about donuts? Then suddenly that's more relevant to local market. They're more likely to link to my result. So we're constantly taking content, using data, and structuring it so media can consume it and link to it really, really easily. And we do other things as well. As we also do, guest blog posts. We also do link trades. We also do many other things. But, those kind of, I would say in our overall results, those affect us maybe, 10% of the overall benefit we get from links. This data-driven, PR-driven approach is the other 90%. So those others are kind of nice to have. This is the core of how we generate thousands or tens of thousands of links is using data studies in this way by having an ownable area. Okay. And then finally, as you're doing this, segment results by niche for other interesting insights. So we might say, okay, we've got this data study on like how is business doing during the pandemic, during COVID-19. We might segment that for financial services and health and wellness and hospitality and other niches. And as we do that, then suddenly the data is more accessible to like trade publications that could link to us in each of those niches. So how you create a data strategy and then how you create localization and niches to match the media landscape allows you to create links by the dozens or hundreds or even thousands at a time instead of one by one by one by one. It's more scalable. Okay, so outreach efforts can be used to help share-worthy content find its audience who will link to it, but the goal is to actually get them to keep linking to you again and again and again because you have these ownable areas. And so what we do actually is we distribute now to 10,000 media outlets, use us as National Day as the source of truth about what happens on which day. These are some of the places that cite us all the time. You can imagine these are a lot of places, New York Times, Today Show, that have high domain authority. And then also now as well, we have over 10,000 influencers, whether it's fashion, beauty, lifestyle, and there's many, many verticals, food, travel, business, tech, that use us as the source of truth as well. So everything we do is customized to the campaign, but if you think in this way, you start to have a scalable link building approach. Brings us to new rule number 2, which is new rule, think small to get big. Can you think about specific niches and winning niche terms first? You set yourself up to win universal terms down the road. And so what this actually means is that instead of being like, I want to win, common one for clients of ours, they want to win like real estate agency or something like that, like, right? So people just looking for like to buy a house, really big term. Instead, you can look at local terms or niche terms specific to certain verticals, win those first, and depending how you build, this is a little bit of a technical SEO example, but depending how you build your link structure, if you start winning all of these niche terms, and then there's a parent term above it, you can then show Google that if you rank high for these niche terms, which are easier to win, you should actually rank higher for the parent term, which is harder to win. So instead of going top down, you go bottom up. And so here's some examples of that where you have like a universal term, right? Which is like animal holidays, but then you go after the niche terms where you can actually get way more, plus they're easier to win. So whether it's Penguin Day or Bird Day or Llama Day or Bison Day or Sloth Day or Panda Day or Respect Your Cat Day, you add all of those up, it's actually more monthly search traffic than the bigger holiday, even though you might go after the bigger holiday first. And also, you can actually win Animal Holiday by winning all of the smaller ones, okay? So think about that, and I'm gonna actually talk about specifically another way to do niche content in a second. So you might be thinking like, well, yeah, I mean, if I could write Penguin Day article, and I could write Bird Day article, and write Respect Your Cat Day article, but I don't have enough staff. You know, what if I can only write the Animal Holiday one? So I'm gonna show you about how content creation has really shifted to become more scalable and how you can use that to supercharge your SEO. Brings us to new rule number 3. Create blueprints rather than articles. And this is exactly what I'm talking about, which is specifically, how do you create what is essentially a blueprint for, let's say, this Animal Holiday article, but that can be customized. So what we will do is we will, instead of we won't just duplicate or copy all of this content. Instead, we'll say, okay, here's our base article. Here's what it has in the base. But here are elements that can be swapped out for this certain niche. So we might have base like the history of the animal, and where the animal is found in the world, and how to celebrate this special holiday for the animal. And these are kind of base things we have. But then within that, we'll have instructions for writers on how they can customize and change that from the same framework to fit each of those specific animals. Plus, on those holidays that we really want to win that are most competitive, right? Some of the ones that we're like, oh man, maybe it's a bit harder on Panda Day or Penguin Day. Those have a lot of traffic. So then we're going to introduce variations into our template, our blueprint template, where, okay, if we really want to get this, and now we're going to add a little bit of a statistic. Now we're going to add a data set for those ones that are more competitive. So what we will do is, instead of writing an article to start, we'll create a blueprint that can then be deployed to create 30 more articles. And if you do that, your content can become more scalable. That means your link building and your specific pages tied to those links, those landing pages, can become more scalable. And so the name of the game is scale as you do SEO right now. So here's an example of a scalable SEO blueprint where essentially you have, let's say, that pillar content, that blueprint you have, and then we might make niche content 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all unique, they're different, but they're based on the same pillar. They're based on the same structure. They're based on the same approach, but they're customized in ways in which, kind of the underlying structure is essentially identical, but the customizations make them unique, and it allows us to scale content better. So the key to unlocking SEO is to make it rapidly scalable and work laterally according to these niche areas instead of sequentially just going article to article to article. Before we get into number 4, and I'll explain what I mean, think short-term over long-term, Jackson, are there other questions that relate to kind of the first 3 new rules we went over that we should cover right
now? We have a couple upcoming, but let's give it a minute. Let's sort of see where it goes, because I have a sense that we're going to be answering this naturally in the next couple of slides.
Okay, Jackson is an incredible predictor. If you want to know, who's going to win the World Series, if you know, which restaurant's going to be hot or not, he's good at predicting things. Therefore, if you're predicting that what I'm going to cover is going to help answer a question, I trust you. I'm just messing with you, Jackson. I believe you though. You are a good predictor.
I got a crystal ball here. Well, yeah. What I will say is and I'll cue you up for this because I know it's something that you're sort of thinking about. And Julie was wondering sort of how is it that AdWords impacts SEO, right? If you're running an AdWords campaign.
Sure, you're running paid campaign and you're doing this on, with or on top of or in parallel to an SEO and organic campaign. Sure. I would think one thing that I would kind of think about and just, and think about how you approach it, which we do both, SEO and SEM, is there's a couple different dynamics going on. One is, what is the mind share in the screen real estate we can capture for someone searching for something? So for instance, we know, because of how AdWords works, how SEM works, is that we don't have to pay for something unless people click. So maybe we want to display an ad so that we dominate more of the page, but actually we don't necessarily want them to click that ad. We want them to actually click our organic link in the below. So if we can actually get SEO working with SEM, maybe we can have the best of both worlds. We dominate more of the page real estate, but we actually try to drive people to the organic link that we don't have to pay for, which now is more credible because there's more things on the page. And also there's a little bit built in of a certain percent of the population. Like, I don't want to be sold to, I don't want to click that paid link. I want to find an organic link if it meets my intent. But if it doesn't meet my intent, okay, then I'll do the paid link, right? So some people think like that too. So one of the things to think about is how you make them work together. But generally, if you can make on the same keyword search term, SEM and SEM on its own, just the paid AdWords on its own, versus that with SEO, you get overall better performance if you can get SEO working as well. And the reason is, one, you dominate more page real estate, more people are likely to come to you. And two, you can actually drive up the effectiveness of the paid, because to get that same traffic, people might not always have to click on the ad, in which case you don't have to pay for it. So it can actually totally change the economics of your SEM campaign. Okay, so great question. We can talk more of that in a little bit at the end. Okay, I got my screen sharing here. Let me go into the slides and talk about new rule number 4. Think short-term over long-term. This is a counterintuitive rule. It's one of the reasons why I love it so much. And if you've heard me speak before, I love things that are simple, surprising, and significant. This one's surprising because usually what we say is, hey, SEO is a medium to long-term discipline. You gotta think longer term. But what I'd argue is there's some changes that have happened that allow you to actually see progress much, much faster. One of them is that Google Search Console is typically now updating within 24 hours. So it's easier than ever to track the immediate impact of your SEO efforts. So it used to be when you had that like multi-day delay, you'd do something and you'd have to wait, right? So it was a lot less instant gratification. But now, because Google Search Console is updating, you do something, you see what happens the next day, and you're like, ooh, that was good, that was positive, but I need to tweak it a little bit more. Then you come back the next day, oh, that worked. Okay, let me try this, let me try that. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let me scale that back. Let me try. So suddenly, because some of the tools have increased their speed, it allowed you to adjust. So it allowed you to be like, instead of being like, I have this long-term plan, planning is good, but instead of that, now you can be like, I'm gonna iterate. I'm gonna do version 1, version 2, version 3, and I don't have to wait a couple weeks or a month to see what happens. I can adjust on the way. So that has reduced the kind of our term horizon and how we look at SEO. But then also there's this, which is, can we, instead of just looking at, our ranking, instead of just looking at, did we convert on this page, maybe we need to break down the phases of this and shorten our time horizon as well so we can start seeing our results. So this is really powerful if you're like, yeah, I want to invest in SEO, but I can't wait 6 months to measure ROI. I need ROI now. Well, if you're thinking that, or if maybe you have to report to leadership or C-suite or management that's saying that, instead, you say, actually, you know what, we're going to see results right away because there's 3 phases of winning any search keyword. The first phase is impressions. So what this means is, we don't even need people to click yet. Let's just see the number of impressions that Google displays for us. So that means that just like we showed up on the page somewhere that someone saw the page. Maybe they never got near our link, but we increased the impression. And early on, you can actually show the impressions going up, and impressions lead to clicks later. But it's a great initial indicator. So sometimes you're not ready to win clicks. For the example of the person that, hey, you're in a competitive space, you have this kind of platform where people link to each other and connect to each other, like a Wikipedia, a wiki for that. Instead, what you actually do is let's win impressions first. Let's just be in the game. And then after you start winning impressions phase, then you go to the clicks phase. So now let's actually start to maximize our Google search results for the number of times searchers click our link. So at the first, we're just like, let's just get impressions, let's appear on pages. Now let's look at clicks. And then once you got clicks, now you got people to your site. But then we've got to convert. We've got to maximize people sign up as a lead, sign up for our newsletter, buy our product. So the point is, instead of just jumping to that conversion phrase, what if we set up metrics and ROI and KPI and goals that we can demonstrate to our management or our leadership or to ourselves that we're making progress, and we shorten our time horizon. So here's how you look at keywords, how we do. We look at, there's a level of difficulty. There's low hanging fruit, not a lot of competition. People have neglected it, we can win it fast. There's mid-tier opportunities. Okay, they're going to require more time and effort because there is more competitive activity. Or there's the most competitive. There's a high payoff, but there's multiple super aggressive competitors that are optimizing too, and it's going to take us a while to unseat them. So the key is that in how you structure a campaign to realize progress and demonstrate progress, you got to look at each of these differently. And this is how we would look at it. So we would say, hey, low-hanging fruit, maybe in a couple months we can actually win the impressions battle. Then a couple months we can win clicks, and then a couple months we can win conversion. We can actually accelerate that. This is a conservative timeline. We can accelerate it faster. Mid-tier, even while we do low-hanging fruit, we're going to have mid-tier, which is going to take a little bit longer. Most competitive are going to take a little bit longer than that. But what this shows is we can get results if we have the right metrics in month 1, right? For low-hanging fruit for impressions, and some mid-tier in month 1. And maybe some competitive, but most likely competitive is going to come in month 2 or 3. So what we have to do is set our metrics for the time frame and say, instead of being like, yeah, this is going to take a year because it's the most competitive, well, what can we get this month and next month and the month after that now? And let's set that expectation and let's set that plan. So according to this, we'll see more impressions within 2 months, more clicks within 4 months, more conversions within 6 months, even as we pursue a 12-month plan to conquer the most difficult keywords. And you know what? Depending on how we do this, it might not take 2 months for those impressions either. We might be able to do this next week, depending on how we target them and how we optimize. So that's really powerful, is that the time horizon is shortening if you structure the right metrics to go after the right keywords and do things in parallel. Brings us to new rule number 5, which is all search is local. And one of the surprising things about this is that because all search is local, you don't realize the amount of time that Google is actually serving up a local search result, even though it's a global term. So let me give you an example. If you were searching again for like the real estate agency example. So, okay, you search for real estate agency, you might think like, okay, what are the biggest real estate agencies in the world? Which are the ones that have the best SEO people? Who's gonna win that one, right? Well, what actually has happened is over time, yes, Google may serve up generic results, but they're going to prioritize often a lot of local results, meaning that if you're in Austin, Texas, or if you're in York in the UK, or if you're in Queensland in Australia, or if you're in someplace else, Google's, a lot of it is actually going to serve up the local results, even if people were not searching for something locally. So what this means is you start needing to actually look at niches or local strategies, and you've got to win those too. Now, one, that's a little bit daunting because it's like, man, meaning I can't just win real estate agency. I've got to like win it for someone in Queensland. And even if they're not searching for Queensland real estate agency, it still might serve them that. So one, it's daunting, but two, it's actually democratizing. Because what that means is that there's a lot of things to win. And in fact, if we win a lot of those local things, then we could actually push up our performance for the overall term, and we could win a real estate agency term even that is not even localized. We could win that too. So because of the prevalence of, and the question you might be asking is, well, why has Google prioritized local so much? Well, the reason is it relates to insight and new rule number 6, which is you can't win if you don't match user intent. Google started to figure out, to answer the question, is that localization better matched user intent, and not just for super obvious stuff that people could be searching for. Let's not even use, real estate is a little bit local as an example, but someone could be searching for a generic term like weight loss, but actually delivering a local result relevant to them actually improve the user intent. And so actually someone might be just researching weight loss generically, but maybe they're like weight loss program, and weight loss program, even though it's not apparently local, they actually might want a solution that actually is based in their town as well. So what happened was local overall was doing a better job of matching user intent. And that brings us to new rule number 6, which is you can't win if you don't match user intent. And so ultimately, this is one of the overarching concepts I think that you have to realize, and it related to something we mentioned earlier, which is instead of gaming Google, it's actually about working with Google to understand that Google is all about matching user intent. What that means is they want to serve up a better search result for what the user is looking for. So instead, of worrying about every algorithm change. Instead, what you worry about is, can I better match user intent? And Google will give you a lot of clues. What are the clues they give you? They'll give you clues based on which pages are at the top of the search results and what are lower down or what are on subsequent pages. It will give you clues in what's changing, what's faster, what's rising fast, what's falling fast. What other clues will Google give you? It will give you clues in terms of the types of results on the page. Is it all of one type or is it mixed? Is the intent not as clear? Google will give you clues based on what other elements are displayed on the results page. Are we displaying a video? Are we displaying a recipe? Are we displaying something else that will give you clues? It will also give you clues in terms of AdWords. What AdWords are being displayed and how does that factor in? So all of these things are all about understanding user intent. And the way to have an SEO strategy that survives, that lasts no matter what Google does, no matter what Bing does, no matter what new players come into your vertical, is to just focus on delivering amazing value to a user. And to do that, you have to understand the user intent. So here is a modern buyer's journey, which can be helpful in understanding intent. And what you would do is you would map this to keywords. So is the keyword indicative of someone or are the results indicative of someone that's just trying to identify their problem, right? They don't know what it is they have. It's like, it's like if you're looking for like, you've got kind of a medical condition or ailment, you're just trying to like figure out what is my problem? What do I have? What is it, right? A certain set of search keywords relate to problem identification. Then, okay, I know the problem now. Then there's a certain set that people are searching for related to solution identification. Okay, so like what is the realm of solutions I have? But then we might actually say, okay, well then now we're like, okay, I've got sort of a range of solutions, but which ones do I want to pick? What are my requirements for that? Let me define those, and that's a certain search term related to that intent. But then it's like, okay, now I might need, like, who's going to provide the thing that's the solution that meets my requirements? Now I'm talking about selecting vendors. But now I might be searching for things, and for validation, suddenly it's like, well, okay, I found someone, they seem to meet my requirements, they seem to have a solution for my problem. It seems to, it's a vendor that seems to work, but like, are they good? Or is it just a scam? Are they trying to like rip me off? Especially if it's a digital product or e-commerce, like they want me to enter my credit card on their site. Like, how do I know this is trustworthy? And then finally, it's purchase, right? Maybe I've done all of that. And it's like, I just want to buy now. I'm just trying to get online, buy now. And so maybe I'm searching for actually like the store I want to buy from. So thinking in terms of those parts of the buyer's journey, mapping keywords is basically helps lead us to intent, because this starts to help us understand what is the intent of every search. And the problem is, if we're delivering a result that maybe is number one in Google search results, but it does not match intent, the problem is people are going to click on us, or either one, they're not going to click on us, in which case Google's going to know like it doesn't really match intent because no one clicked on that. Or B, maybe we tricked them, right? We have a great little meta description that gets displayed, but they click on it and they're like, oh, nope, this isn't for me at all, and they click away, and Google's tracking that too, that click away very fast. And so the problem is, even if we were number one, if we managed to do that, we're not going to stay one for long. I mean, unless everyone was just as bad as we are, right? If someone matches intent better, they're gonna be higher. So the point I want to make is that if you want to get out of the game of like, oh my gosh, Google made this algorithm change and our traffic's down 30%, what do we do? Or, oh, this competitor came in and they have this unfair advantage with content and they got a really high domain authority site, now they're in our space, and what, they just bumped us down. If you want to avoid that game, then what you just do is focus on matching user intent better and delivering value, because that is the long-term game that Google is playing. And if you play the same long-term game, you will match Google no matter what they decide to do, because ultimately that's their goal, as well as sell a few ads. Okay, so understanding search intent, we can categorize all of that. There's different types of intent, like informational intent. Is that, just people are trying to gather information? Is there navigational? Are they targeting, a certain kind of website they're trying to find? Is it transactional? They want to buy something, they want to download something, they want to do something. So those are also clues as well. And as you do that, focus your content on the customer search intent. So help answer the key questions behind any search phrase. And another clue, really, really powerful, the related questions that Google displays. So Google now will often display questions related to it. So those related questions are giving you a lot of clues about intent. And number two, target mid-tail or long-tail keywords. So before we go after the most competitive head-to-head, top keywords, let's win some of the smaller battles. And those battles can help clue you into intent better, because a lot of those have very specific niches. They're more specific. So as you get better at identifying intent and starting to win those, because people are staying on your page longer and clicking into you, then it helps you get better at measuring intent for the bigger ones. And Jackson, do we have a question on that, since we've reached our kind of last new rule, and it's sort of my most important point of the day, which is going to come up after this slide?
No, Ben, I think we are good to go. One thing I'll note before you get into your most important point of the day is I have listed contact information for Ben. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. You can tweet at him at Benjamin Kaplan. You could email him, ben.kaplan@prhacker.com, or myself, jackson.carpenter@prhacker.com. And you can watch this and other webinars and other great content on Ben's new YouTube channel, which is linked in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Jackson. And by the way, Jackson is a fantastic person to connect with. He's actually an amazing PR strategist in terms of like, what is that insight, that story, that data study that's going to attract media interest, that's going to be simple, surprising, and significant, and relevant and timely to the conversation. So he's actually a great resource as well. And I'm happy to connect with you, of course, as well. I love kind of solving SEO and other problems. So just to kind of sum up this point, search intent ensures that we not only rank, but we get clicks for keywords that have the highest intent for our product and service. So the other part of this is not only matching user intent for the keyword, but we need people with a certain type of intent that leads to product sales. So, or service sales, or downloads, or becoming a member, or signing up, or whatever it is that we're trying to drive. So it makes sense to be aligned from the point of view of SEO, but it also makes sense to be aligned for intent, just for converting consumers. And as I mentioned, one of the things we do, we call it lead intent mapping. We're also a web development company. Top Digital, helps develop many websites and web platforms. One of the things we actually do is we actually go map lead intent. So we actually track people coming to our site, watch them go around the site, and actually write down the questions that are running through their mind as they go to different pages, so that we can understand that intent better. And that's something that I've found works amazingly well. And every client we've ever done this from has said that delivers great value in trying to understand, like, what are we doing on our website? How do we develop what will deliver more value and be easier for the end user? So brings us to kind of my final point and the final point of the day. Before I do that, my question always is, what is the one thing? So what is the one thing you took out of today that is most helpful, interesting, unusual, surprising, or the thing that's just most memorable? So tweet that at me, at Benjamin Kaplan. You can also add it to the chat room. And I always ask this question, one, because it helps us get better to know what is sticking with people. But two, as you start to become a content developer, understanding what is the one thing people are taking away, and does that match their intent, helps you deliver more relevant, better content. That helps you in SEO, and that helps you in a webinar. Second, this is a little hack, which is one, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. I don't accept every LinkedIn request. So here's what you do. If you hold up your phone right now, my phone is somewhere around here. Let's see, in my pocket. Okay, got my phone here. Hold it up to your screen. And if you actually open up the LinkedIn app, go to the search bar, there's that little QR code, little symbol there. Click on it, and then you can actually scan someone else's code. So if you scan this on my screen, if you don't have time to scan it right now, just take a photo of the screen. Then that will connect you to me on LinkedIn, or that's also my LinkedIn link. And if you just send me a note in your connection request that you attended my webinar, I accept everyone who attended a webinar so that we can have a continued discussion. So do that, and then we can continue the discussion or consume each other's content. I post a lot of new studies, new data studies, new insights, new tutorials, new webinar snippets, all on LinkedIn. And then finally, this is my email. It's at one of our agencies, ben.kaplan@prhacker.com. That gets to me fast. Also, ben.kaplan@topagency.com works as well, and would love to learn more about your challenge. And if, of course, if there's a way we can help, would love to help as well. So, and then finally, before I end the final part of the day, today's slides, if you're interested in getting them, just go to events.benkaplan.com. new-rules-of-SEO. Go there, sign up, and we'll get you the slides if this is useful as well, if you need to share someone else in your team. And we even sometimes do, I've been to a number of like Fortune 500 companies, other companies, and actually done this presentation for them, for their audience. So if you have an audience and you benefit from them hearing this directly, we can do that as well. Let me end though on the final thought of the day, which is an important thought related to SEO. And that and content and also PR and also all of these disciplines. And that is that I think we're in a golden age for doing this. And not only that, we're in a golden time period within that age, actually during the COVID-19 pandemic right now. And that's because we're in this unfortunate circumstance where obviously tons of people, tons of companies, tons of families have been affected by this horrific pandemic. But at the same time, across a number of our clients, a number of our web properties, all of our digital metrics are up because people are at home, and people are engaging, and people are looking for solutions. And so we have found that rankings now, domain authority now, links now, everything is up. Everything is up across the board. So if you're someone who has been thinking like, hey, I need to do some work in SEO, or I need to do some work in digital marketing, but we just don't have time now, we're gonna wait 6 months from now. I would urge you to think about that and at least tackle some piece now, because everything is accelerated. A lot of people have taken their eye off the SEO ball because they've been affected by the economy. Others are less aggressive than they have been before. And yet there is huge demand for content, especially content that can relate to the current pandemic. And a lot of that content doesn't exist already. So every time there's a crisis, it's a reset. People need new thought leaders. People need new content. People need more relevant information. So if you are putting this off, I think don't put it off. Take action today, take action tomorrow. It doesn't have to be a huge challenge or task, but if you take action now and make small incremental steps, especially right now, you're gonna accelerate your process and growth. And SEO is like the new, billboard, right? It's like having, a billboard in every town. You used to actually have to physically put a billboard. Now, if you do that through SEO and you can accelerate it now, you can do that without having to do that, just by being smart and combining insight, strategy, content, measurement, optimization, maybe a little data study, maybe a little bit of PR magic, and you can have incredible gains that can transform your business. So Jackson, any other final questions, or are we sort of good for today and I can wish everyone farewell?
I think we're good to go, Ben. And thanks to all of you who have hung in there all the way to the very end. We look forward to having you again next week as well.
And topic, let me announce for next week, and I'll announce also the week after. So next week is actually going to be on how to become a thought leader for social justice. We do this whole series on how to become a thought leader. We're going to apply the principles to issues and causes and what's trending right now, whether that's Black Lives Matter, or whether that's a certain environmental cause, or whether that's looking for something for the LGBTQ community, or any number of social justice issues and causes. We're going to apply it next week, so that's a super important one. Jackson, if you can post, we do have a link, I believe, from the team in the chat for the link to sign up and register for that. And then the week after, we're going to do a presentation from our National Today platform called The Power of Calendar-Based Marketing, and that is all about viral time triggers. How do you get people to convert now and not wait and not delay by taking action now? And there's actually power in the calendar. And oftentimes as marketers, we say like right person, right message, right time. Calendar-based marketing is all about saying, don't neglect right time. Timing matters. How do you start thinking time first? And we're going to talk about calendar-based marketing as a new way to do that, and how you get viral triggers to get people to convert. So that's in 2 weeks. Next week is social justice. We're just getting warmed up. And if this is useful, please tweet at me at Benjamin Kaplan and let me know your one thing. All right. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Jackson has some webinar links in the chat room, so we'll let that run for just a second. And we'll see everyone hopefully next week.